Elena never thought a simple Tuesday morning could change everything. She was arranging roses in the front window of her family's flower shop when she heard her mother crying in the back room. At first, she thought maybe her younger brother Antonio had gotten worse again. His illness had been draining their savings for months now, but when she walked to the back of the shop, Elena saw something that made her heart drop. Two men in expensive suits were sitting across from her parents at the small wooden table where they usually ate lunch. Her father's hands were shaking as he held a stack of papers. "Papa, what's happening?" Elena asked softly. Her mother looked up with tears streaming down her face. "Elena, sit down, my dear." The man in the darker suit cleared his throat. "Miss Elena, I'm afraid your family owes a significant amount of money to the Blackwood family. Your father borrowed money to keep this business running during the difficult times." Elena felt dizzy. She knew things had been tough, but she had no idea how bad it really was. She worked 2 jobs already, trying to help pay the bills while studying business at the community college. She thought they were managing somehow. "How much?" she whispered. $500,000, the man said matter-of-factly. Elena's world stopped spinning. $500,000? That was more money than she could even imagine. More than their little flower shop could make in 10 years. Her father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had to borrow the money when Antonio got sick. The treatments, the hospital bills. I used the shop and our house as security. I thought business would get better." Elena looked around the small shop that had been in their family for 3 generations. The walls were covered with photos of weddings they had decorated, birthday parties they had helped make special. Her grandmother had started this business with nothing but a dream and a few flower seeds. "What happens if we can't pay?" Elena asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. The second man spoke for the first time. "You have 30 days. After that, we take the shop and the house. Everything." After the men left, Elena's family sat in silence for a long time. Her mother kept crying quietly, and her father stared at the papers like they might disappear if he looked at them long enough. "There has to be something we can do," Elena said. "I can drop out of school, work more hours. Maybe we can get a loan from somewhere else." Her father shook his head. "No bank will give us money now. Our credit is ruined. And even if you worked day and night, we could never make that much money in 30 days. That evening, Elena couldn't sleep. She walked around their small house, looking at everything they might lose. The kitchen, where her mother taught her to cook. The living room, where they watched movies together every Friday night. The small garden, where her father grew vegetables and her favorite sunflowers. She thought about Antonio, sleeping in his room, with his medicines on the nightstand. He was only 16, and he needed those expensive treatments to stay healthy. Where would they live if they lost the house? How would they pay for his medicine? The next morning, Elena was getting ready for her job at the local cafe when her mother called her into the kitchen. Her parents looked like they hadn't slept at all. "Elena, something happened last night," her mother said carefully. "We received a call." "What kind of call?" Her father took a deep breath. "From the Blackwood family. They made us an offer." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Nothing good ever came from offers made by people you owed money to. "What kind of offer?" she asked. Her parents looked at each other nervously. Finally, her mother spoke. "They said if you marry into their family, they would forgive our debt completely." Elena stared at them. "Marry? Marry who?" "One of their sons," her father said quietly. "They said it would be a business arrangement. You would be taken care of, and our family would be safe." Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. "You want me to marry a complete stranger to pay off your debt?" "No," her mother said quickly. "We don't want that at all. But Elena, we're out of options. If we lose everything, what happens to Antonio? What happens to all of us?" Elena walked to the window and looked out at their small garden. Just yesterday, she had been planning her future. She wanted to finish school and help grow their family business into something bigger. Maybe start planning weddings and special events, not just selling flowers. Now someone was asking her to give up her dreams, her freedom, her chance to find love on her own terms, all to pay for a debt she didn't even know existed. But as she stood there, she heard Antonio coughing in his room. She thought about her parents, who had worked so hard their whole lives just to keep their family together. She thought about losing the only home she had ever known. "What do we know about this family?" she asked without turning around. "They're very wealthy," her father said. "They own many businesses in the city. The man I spoke to said his son is a good person, that he would treat you well." Elena almost laughed, but not because anything was funny. "A good person? Papa, good people don't force someone into marriage to collect a debt." Her mother came to stand beside her at the window. "Elena, my love, we would never ask this of you if we had any other choice, but maybe it wouldn't be so terrible. Rich families can provide opportunities. You could still study, still have a good life." Elena knew her mother was trying to make the best of an impossible situation. But how could anyone have a good life when it started with being sold like property to pay someone else's bills? "I need time to think," Elena said. That day at work, Elena could barely focus on taking orders or making coffee. Her mind kept spinning with questions. What kind of person was this son of the Blackwood family? Would he be cruel? Would he expect her to just be grateful and silent? Would she ever have any freedom at all? But every time she started to feel angry about the unfairness of it all, she thought about her family losing everything. She imagined Antonio having to stop his treatments. She pictured her parents, who had sacrificed so much for their children, having to start over with nothing at their age. By the time she got home that evening, Elena had made her decision. It wasn't really a choice at all. When someone you love is drowning, you don't think about whether you're a strong swimmer. You just jump in the water. "I'll do it," she told her parents. "I'll meet with them and see what they want." Her mother started crying again, but this time Elena wasn't sure if the tears were from relief or sadness, probably both. That night, Elena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would call the Blackwood family and agree to meet the man she was supposed to marry. She had no idea what he would be like, but she tried to prepare herself for the worst. She never imagined that the moment she saw him, everything she thought she knew about her situation would change completely. Elena spent 3 days trying to figure out what to wear to meet her future husband. It felt strange picking out clothes to meet someone she was supposed to spend her life with. She finally chose a simple blue dress that her mother said brought out her eyes. Not that it mattered what she looked like, she thought. This wasn't about love or attraction. This was business. The restaurant they chose was fancier than anywhere Elena had ever been. Crystal glasses sparkled on white tablecloths, and soft piano music played in the background. Elena felt completely out of place as the hostess led her to a quiet corner table. She arrived 10 minutes early because she was too nervous to wait at home any longer. Her hands were shaking as she smoothed her dress and tried to calm her breathing. She had practiced what to say, how to act professional and distant. This was just a meeting to discuss terms, nothing more. Then she saw him walking toward her table. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The man approaching was nothing like what she had expected. She had imagined someone cold and calculating. Maybe older, definitely someone who looked like he came from a world of business deals and money. Instead, she saw someone who looked to be about her age, with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile that seemed genuine. "Elena?" he asked softly as he reached the table. "I'm Adrian Blackwood." When she nodded, he extended his hand to help her stand. And the moment their hands touched, Elena felt something she absolutely had not prepared for. A warmth spread through her fingers and up her arm, and for just a second, she forgot why they were there. "It's nice to meet you," she managed to say, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. Adrian pulled out her chair for her, which surprised Elena. She had expected this meeting to be formal and uncomfortable, but he seemed to genuinely care about making her feel comfortable. "I have to be honest with you," Adrian said once they were both seated. "I never wanted this meeting to happen." Elena looked up at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I told my father that arranging someone's marriage to pay a debt was wrong. I fought against it for weeks." Adrian ran his hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "But my father, he usually gets what he wants." Elena studied his face, trying to figure out if he was being truthful or if this was some kind of act. "So you don't want to get married either?" "Not like this," Adrian said firmly. "Marriage should be about love and choice, not about solving financial problems." Elena felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as bad as she had feared. "Then why are you here?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands. "Because I understand what it's like to feel trapped by family, circumstances, and because I've seen what my father does to people who don't pay their debts. I couldn't let that happen to your family." "What do you mean you understand?" Elena asked. Adrian looked up at her, and Elena saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "I wasn't born into the Blackwood family. My father adopted me when I was 12 after my parents died in a car accident. I was angry and scared, living in foster homes. Harrison Blackwood took me in, gave me everything I could ever want. But that kind of debt, it never really goes away." Elena felt her heart soften toward him. She hadn't expected to find common ground with someone from such a wealthy family. "So you know what it feels like to owe someone everything." "Exactly. And I know what it's like to feel like you don't have choices." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "But Elena, I want you to know that if we do this, if we go through with this marriage, I want it to be real, not just a business arrangement." Elena's heart started beating faster. "What do you mean, real?" "I mean, I want us to be partners. I want to get to know you, to build something together. I don't want you to feel like you're trapped or like you owe me anything." Adrian's voice was earnest. "I run a foundation that helps kids who are in tough situations like I was. Maybe you could help me with that. Maybe we could find ways to help other families who are facing what yours is facing." Elena stared at him. This was not the conversation she had expected to have. "You want to help other people who are in debt to your family?" Adrian nodded. "I've been trying to change how my father does business for years. Maybe together we could actually make a difference." The waiter came to take their order, and Elena realized she had been so focused on Adrian that she hadn't even looked at the menu. Adrian ordered for both of them, somehow choosing exactly what she would have wanted. "How did you know I'd like that?" she asked. Adrian smiled, and Elena noticed how his whole face changed when he smiled. "Lucky guess. You seem like someone who appreciates simple good things." As they waited for their food, Adrian asked her about her family, her dreams, her plans for school. Elena found herself talking more than she had intended. There was something about the way he listened, really listened, that made her feel like her words mattered. "I always wanted to expand our flower shop," she heard herself saying. "Not just sell flowers, but plan whole events. Weddings, parties, celebrations. I love the idea of helping people create beautiful memories." "That sounds wonderful," Adrian said. "I bet you're good at making people feel special." Elena felt her cheeks warm. "I don't know about that." "I do," Adrian said simply. "You've made me feel more relaxed in the last hour than I have in months." Elena looked at him carefully. "Are you always this nice to people your father forces you to marry?" Adrian laughed, and the sound made Elena's stomach flutter in a way she definitely hadn't expected. You're actually the first person my father has forced me to marry. I hope you'll be the last. What if we don't? What if this doesn't work out? Elena asked. Adrian's expression grew serious. Then we figure it out together. But Elena, I have to tell you something. From the moment I saw you walk in here, I hoped it would work out. Elena felt her heart skip. Why? Because you're brave. You're here, willing to sacrifice your own happiness for your family. And because... Adrian paused, looking almost shy. Because when I saw you, I thought maybe my father accidentally did something right for once. Elena didn't know what to say. She had come here expecting to negotiate the terms of a loveless arrangement. Instead, she was sitting across from someone who made her laugh, who shared her values, who seemed to genuinely care about her as a person. Adrian, she said carefully, what you're talking about? Getting to know each other, building something, real? That's not what I expected. What did you expect? Elena thought about how to explain it. I expected someone who would see me as payment for a debt. Someone who would want me to be grateful and quiet and stay out of the way. Adrian reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Elena, you're not payment for anything. You're a person with dreams and feelings and ideas. If we do this, I want to know all of those things about you. Elena looked down at his hand covering hers. She had spent so many nights lying awake, dreading this meeting. But sitting here now, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. So what happens now? She asked. Adrian squeezed her hand gently. Now we see if we can fall in love before we have to get married. Elena smiled for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation might turn into something beautiful after all. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Elena found herself standing in front of a mirror in a beautiful white dress she never thought she would wear. The wedding was happening faster than she ever imagined, but Adrian had convinced her that waiting would only make things harder for her family. Are you ready, my dear? Her mother asked, adjusting the simple veil Elena had chosen. They had decided to keep the wedding small and elegant, just their families and a few close friends. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. 3 weeks ago, she thought she was walking into a nightmare. But in those 3 weeks, Adrian had surprised her every single day. He picked her up for coffee every morning before she went to work. He brought flowers to her mother and spent hours talking with her father about the flower business. He even played video games with Antonio, making her sick brother laugh in ways she hadn't heard in months. I think so, Elena said, though her heart was beating so fast she could hardly breathe. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden behind Adrian's family estate. Elena had worried about fitting in with his wealthy family, but Adrian had made sure everything felt comfortable for her. He had even asked her to help choose the flowers, and seeing her family's arrangements decorating the space made her feel less nervous. When Elena walked down the aisle, she looked for Adrian's face in the small crowd. The moment their eyes met, all her fears seemed to quiet down. He was looking at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And for the first time in weeks, Elena felt like maybe this was really happening because they wanted it to. Not just because they had to. You look amazing, Adrian whispered when she reached him at the altar. The ceremony itself was simple, but when it came time for their vows, both Elena and Adrian had written their own words. Elena, Adrian said, his voice steady but emotional. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was being forced into an arrangement that would make us both miserable. Instead, I found someone who makes me want to be a better man. I promise to spend every day earning the love I hope we'll build together. Elena felt tears in her eyes as she spoke her own vows. Adrian, you showed me that sometimes the most unexpected paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. I promise to walk this path with you, wherever it takes us." When they kissed to seal their marriage, Elena felt something she had never experienced before. It wasn't just the kiss itself, though that made her heart race. It was the feeling that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The reception was held in the same garden, with tables decorated with arrangements from Elena's family shop. Elena's mother cried happy tears as she danced with Elena's father, and even Antonio seemed to have more energy than usual, laughing with Adrian's younger cousins. But the real test came later, when Elena moved her few belongings into the Blackwood mansion. The house was bigger than Elena had ever imagined a home could be. Her bedroom back home could have fit into the closet of the room she would now share with Adrian. Everything was elegant and expensive, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers. "I know it's a lot," Adrian said as he helped her carry her suitcases upstairs. "If you want to redecorate or change anything, please do. I want you to feel at home here." Elena looked around the huge bedroom with its king-size bed and wondered how she would ever feel comfortable in such a fancy space. "It's beautiful, but it doesn't feel like me." "Then we'll make it feel like you," Adrian said simply. "What would make you feel more at home?" Over the next few days, Adrian kept his promise. He helped Elena add photos of her family, some of her favorite books, and even a small vase where she could keep fresh flowers from her family's shop. Slowly, the room began to feel less like a hotel and more like a place where she belonged. But living in the Blackwood house meant dealing with Adrian's adoptive father, Harrison, and that was much harder than decorating a bedroom. Harrison Blackwood was everything Elena had expected Adrian to be. Cold, calculating, and clearly unhappy about Adrian's choice to marry someone from what he called a working family. He made it clear that he expected Elena to be grateful for her new position and to stay out of family business matters. "Your job now is to support Adrian and represent this family properly," Harrison told Elena during their first private conversation. "I trust you understand how fortunate you are." Elena wanted to tell him exactly what she thought about his attitude, but Adrian had warned her that his father could make things very difficult for her family if she made him angry. So instead, she smiled politely and said, "I understand completely." But what Elena didn't tell Harrison was that she was already planning ways to use her new position to help other families who were facing the same situation hers had been in. Adrian had introduced her to his work with the Youth Foundation, and Elena discovered that she loved helping plan events and programs for the kids they worked with. Her event planning dreams were finally coming true, just in a way she had never expected. "You're really good at this," Adrian told her one evening as they worked together on a fundraising dinner. "The kids love you, and you have amazing ideas for making these events special." Elena felt proud in a way she hadn't since before her family's troubles started. "I love seeing how happy it makes them. Some of these kids have been through such hard times." "Just like their event planner," Adrian said softly, taking her hand. Elena looked at him. Over the past month of marriage, they had grown closer every day. They talked for hours about everything from their childhood dreams to their plans for the foundation. Adrian made her laugh, supported her ideas, and treated her like a true partner in everything they did. But there was still something Elena was holding back. Late at night, when Adrian was sleeping beside her, she sometimes felt guilty about how happy she was becoming. Her family's debt had been paid, Antonio was getting his treatments, and her parents were able to keep their flower shop. But she knew there were other families out there facing the same impossible choices her family had faced. One evening, as Elena was going through some papers for the foundation, she found something that made her blood run cold. It was a list of other families who owed money to the Blackwood businesses. Families with sick children, families who were about to lose their homes, families who were trapped just like hers had been. Elena stared at the papers, her hands shaking. She had been so focused on her own happiness that she had forgotten about all the other people who were suffering because of the same system that had brought her and Adrian together. "Adrian," she called, her voice tight with emotion. "What's wrong?" he asked, rushing to her side. Elena showed him the papers. "How many other families are there? How many other people are trapped like we were?" Adrian's face grew serious as he looked at the list. "Too many. I've been trying to change how my father does business, but he won't listen to me." Elena felt a fire growing in her chest. "Then we need to find another way to help them." "What do you mean?" Elena looked at her husband, the man who had become so much more than she ever expected. "I mean, we need to figure out how to use everything we have access to as part of this family to make sure no one else has to go through what my family went through." Adrian smiled at her, and Elena saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt in her heart. "I was hoping you would say that." As Elena fell asleep that night in Adrian's arms, she realized that their unexpected love story was just beginning. Now they had to figure out how to use their happiness to help others find their own freedom. Elena couldn't sleep. For 3 nights in a row, she had been lying awake thinking about those papers she found. The list of families who owed money to the Blackwood businesses haunted her. She kept imagining other daughters like herself, other parents like hers, all trapped by debts they couldn't possibly pay. Finally, she decided she had to do something about it. While Adrian was at work and Harrison was out of town on business, Elena started looking through the family's financial records. She told herself she was just trying to understand how the lending business worked, but deep down, she knew she was looking for proof of wrongdoing. What she found was worse than she had imagined, hidden in a locked file cabinet that she managed. To open with a paperclip, Elena discovered folders full of documents that made her stomach turn. The Blackwood lending business wasn't just charging high interest rates. They were deliberately targeting families in desperate situations, then finding ways to increase their debts when they couldn't pay. Elena's hands shook as she read through file after file. Families who borrowed money for medical emergencies found their interest rates suddenly doubled. Small business owners who missed a single payment discovered additional fees that made their debts impossible to manage. And worst of all, Elena found evidence that Harrison Blackwood specifically looked for families with young daughters. Then she found her own family's file. Elena felt sick as she read through the papers. Her father had originally borrowed $50,000, not $500,000. But Harrison had added fee after fee, penalty after penalty, until the debt had grown to 10 times its original size. There were notes in Harrison's handwriting about Elena herself, describing her as attractive and likely to be agreeable to arrangement. But the worst discovery was yet to come. At the bottom of her family's file, Elena found a memo that Harrison had written to his business partners. It explained his plan in detail. Target the Marchetti family specifically because they had a daughter of marriageable age, inflate their debt to an impossible amount, then offer to forgive the debt in exchange for a marriage that would bind Adrian more closely to the family business. Elena had to run to the bathroom to be sick. When she came back to the office, she photocopied everything she could find. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the machine, but she managed to copy dozens of documents that proved the Blackwood lending practices were not just cruel, they were completely illegal. The hardest part was acting normal when Adrian came home that evening. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing her cheek as he always did. Elena wanted to tell him everything right away, but she was afraid of how he would react. Would he believe her? Would he think she was attacking his family? Would he choose his adoptive father over her? "Fine," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just worked on some foundation stuff." Over dinner, Elena watched Adrian talk about his day, about the kids they were helping through the foundation, about his plans to expand their programs. He was such a good person, someone who genuinely wanted to help others. How could he be part of a family that destroyed other families for profit? But as the evening went on, Elena realized something important. Adrian had no idea what his father was really doing. Harrison had kept the ugly details of the lending business away from Adrian, letting him focus on the foundation work while the real money came from destroying families like Elena's. That night, after Adrian fell asleep, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had proof that her husband's family had built their fortune by ruining other people's lives. She had proof that her own marriage was the result of a calculated plan to trap her and control Adrian. But what was she supposed to do with that? Information? If she exposed Harrison, it would destroy the man who had raised Adrian from childhood. It might also destroy Adrian's foundation, which actually did help people. And it would definitely put her own family at risk again, because Harrison was the type of man who would find ways to get revenge. But if she stayed quiet, how many other families would suffer? Elena spent the next 2 days gathering more evidence. She found contact information for some of the other families on Harrison's list and carefully reached out to them. What she learned made her even more determined to act. Mrs. Peterson had lost her house and her bakery after borrowing money to pay for her husband's cancer treatments. The Rodriguez family had been forced to send their teenage son to work instead of school because their debt payments were so high. The Kim family had almost lost custody of their children when they couldn't make payments, and Harrison threatened to have them declared unfit parents due to their financial situation. Every story Elena heard made her angrier and more determined. These weren't just numbers on paper. These were real people whose lives had been destroyed by Harrison's greed. Finally, Elena knew she had to tell Adrian the truth. She waited until they were alone in their room one evening, then spread all the documents she had copied across their bed. "Adrian, I need to show you something," she said, her voice shaking. Adrian looked at the papers, then at Elena's pale face. "What is all this?" "It's the truth about your father's business, about how he really makes money, about why he wanted us to get married." Elena watched Adrian's face as he read through the documents. She saw confusion turn to shock, then shock turn to horror, and finally horror turned to a kind of angry sadness she had never seen in him before. "This can't be real," he whispered. "My father wouldn't do this." "Look at my family's file," Elena said gently. "Look at the memo he wrote about targeting us specifically because we had a daughter." Adrian picked up the memo and read it twice. When he looked up at Elena, there were tears in his eyes. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known—" "I know you didn't know," Elena said, sitting beside him on the bed. "But Adrian, this is still happening. Right now, there are families going through what mine went through. What are we going to do about it?" Adrian was quiet for a long time, staring at the papers spread between them. Finally, he looked up at Elena with a determination she recognized from their first meeting. "We're going to stop him," he said. "We're going to expose everything and make sure he can never hurt another family." Elena felt relief wash over her. "Even though he's your father?" Adrian took her hands in his. "Elena, you're my family now, and these people he's hurt, they deserve justice more than he deserves protection." That night, Elena and Adrian stayed, up until dawn making plans. They would take the evidence to the authorities, but they would also need to be careful. Harrison had connections everywhere, and if he found out what they were planning, he would try to stop them. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked as the sun started to rise. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Your father will never forgive you." Adrian looked at her with love and determination in his eyes. "Elena, 3 months ago, I thought I was trapped in a life I didn't choose. Then I met you, and I realized that sometimes the best things come from the worst situations. Now I want to make sure other people get the same chance we did to find something good." Elena kissed him, feeling more in love with her husband than ever before. They had started this marriage as strangers brought together by circumstances beyond their control. Now they were partners, ready to fight together for what was right. But Elena also knew that the hardest part was still ahead of them. Harrison. Blackwood wasn't going to give up his power without a fight, and when he discovered what they were planning, he would do everything he could to destroy them both. Elena's hands were shaking as she walked into the police station with Adrian by her side. They carried a box full of documents that could destroy Harrison Blackwood and change everything for dozens of families. But Elena knew that once they handed over this evidence, their lives would never be the same. "Are you ready for this?" Adrian asked quietly as they approached the front desk. Elena squeezed his hand. "We have to be." Detective Williams listened carefully as Elena and Adrian explained what they had discovered. She was a kind woman with gray hair who reminded Elena of her own mother. As they showed her the documents, Elena watched the detective's expression grow more serious. "This is very serious evidence," Detective Williams said after reviewing the papers. "Mr. Blackwood, you understand that your adoptive father could face criminal charges for these practices?" Adrian nodded, though Elena could see how difficult this was for him. "I understand, but these families deserve justice." The detective explained that building a case would take time. They would need to interview the affected families and gather more evidence. Meanwhile, Elena and Adrian would have to act completely normal around Harrison to avoid raising his suspicion. Going home that night was one of the hardest things Elena had ever done. Harrison was waiting for them in the living room reading a business newspaper as if he didn't have a care in the world. "How was your day, children?" he asked, without looking up from his paper. "Fine," Adrian said, his voice carefully controlled. "Just foundation work." Elena managed to smile and nod, though she felt sick looking at the man who had manipulated her family's desperate situation for his own gain. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena and Adrian lived in a strange kind of double life. During the day, they worked with Detective Williams and met with other families who had been victims of Harrison's lending practices. In the evenings, they came home and pretended everything was normal. Elena found strength she didn't know she had as she spoke with other families about their experiences. Mrs. Peterson cried as she told Elena about losing her bakery. The Rodriguez family showed Elena photos of their son, who had to drop out of school to work. Every story made Elena more determined to see this through. "You're so brave for doing this," Mrs. Peterson told Elena during one of their meetings. "I never thought anyone would care about what happened to us." "Everyone deserves to be treated fairly," Elena replied. "No one should have to choose between their family's safety and their own freedom." But their secret couldn't last forever. 1. Evening, Elena and Adrian came home to find Harrison waiting for them in the living room with a cold smile on his face. "I had an interesting phone call today," he said slowly. "It seems some of our former clients have been talking to the police about their loans. They claim there were irregularities in their contracts." Elena felt her heart drop, but Adrian stepped forward protectively. "Father, we need to talk." Harrison's smile disappeared. "Oh, I think we do, especially since I discovered that someone has been going through my private files." Elena realized there was no point in pretending anymore. "We found everything, Harrison. All the evidence of what you've been doing to innocent families." Harrison stood up, his face turning red with anger. "You ungrateful little girl, I gave you everything. I saved your pathetic family from ruin, and this is how you repay me." "You didn't save us," Elena said, finding her voice stronger than she expected. "You trapped us. You deliberately made our debt impossible to pay so you could force me to marry Adrian." "And it worked perfectly," Harrison sneered. "Adrian was getting too independent, too focused on his little charity projects. He needed something to tie him to this family permanently." Adrian stepped between Elena and his adoptive father. "You used her, and you used me. Everything I thought I knew about this family was a lie." Harrison laughed bitterly. "You think you can destroy me? I have connections everywhere. I can make sure your precious foundation loses all its funding. I can make sure Elena's family faces new problems they never saw coming." "No, you can't," Elena said quietly, "because by tomorrow, Morning. Every newspaper in the city will know exactly what kind of man you really are. Harrison's face went pale. What did you do? Adrian pulled out his phone and showed Harrison a news article that was already online. We didn't just go to the police. We went to journalists, too. The whole story is coming out. Elena watched Harrison's face as he read the headline, Local Business Leader Accused of Predatory Lending Targeting Desperate Families. The article included interviews with several affected families and copies of some of the documents Elena had found. You've destroyed everything, Harrison whispered. But his anger was gone now, replaced by something that looked like fear. No, Adrian said firmly. We've exposed the truth. There's a difference. The next few months were difficult, but also incredible. Harrison was arrested and charged with multiple crimes related to his lending practices. The legitimate parts of the Blackwood business were reorganized under Adrian's leadership, with new policies to ensure fair treatment of all clients. Elena and Adrian established a new foundation specifically to help families who had been victims of predatory lending. They used money from the Blackwood estate to pay back the inflated portions of debts and helped families get back on their feet. Mrs. Peterson was able to reopen her bakery with a loan from their foundation. The Rodriguez family's son went back to school. The Kim family found stable housing and rebuilt their lives. Elena's own family flourished too. With their debt completely forgiven and proven to be fraudulent, her parents expanded their flower shop. Antonio's health improved with proper treatment, and he started helping with the business when he felt well enough. I'm proud of you, Elena's father told her one day as they worked together arranging flowers for a foundation event. You turned a terrible situation into something that helps so many people. Elena smiled as she watched Adrian through the window, playing with some of the children from their programs. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for everything that happened. Without it, I never would have met Adrian, and we never would have been able to help all these families. 6 months after Harrison's arrest, Elena and Adrian decided to renew their wedding vows. This time it wasn't because they had to, but because they wanted to celebrate the love they had built together. The ceremony was held in Elena's family's flower shop, surrounded by the people whose lives they had helped change. Elena wore a simple white dress and carried flowers that she and her mother had arranged together. When we first got married, Adrian said in his new vows, I hoped we might find love together. I never imagined we would find a purpose together, too. Elena looked at her husband, the man who had started as a stranger forced into marriage and had become her true partner in every way. You showed me that love isn't just about finding happiness with someone. It's about working together to make the world a little better. After the ceremony, Elena and Adrian sat in their foundation office, looking at letters from families they had helped. Their love story had begun with obligation and fear, but it had grown into something beautiful and meaningful. Do you ever regret any of it? Adrian asked, holding Elena close as they watched the sunset through their office window. Elena thought about everything they had been through. The fear, the difficult decisions, the confrontation with Harrison, the hard work of building something, good from something terrible. No, she said finally. I think sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected ways. We just have to be brave enough to see where they lead. As Elena fell asleep that night in Adrian's arms, she thought about all the families they were still working to help, all the love they were still building together. Their story had started with a debt that needed to be paid, but it had become something much more valuable than money could ever be.